but so that those without a voice, they can be heard. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. A well quotation that was given by Malala. A very good morning to all of you. Under the umbrella of Sisterhood of Reading, we are going to have a session on Indian mythology and women empowerment. Education plays an important role in making females independent thinkers, decision makers, and confident. It is a tool which can bring sea change in females' life. When we talk about Indian mythology and its connection with some of the very powerful characters like Sita, Draupadi, Savitri, Goddess Kali, most of them, they conveyed a very strong message that do not play with what you think is a woman's weakness because you never know what she can be later. I would like to grab this opportunity to welcome our author, Ms. Bhakti Mathur. Ms. Bhakti Mathur, she is a very renowned author and she has written many books on children. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our principal, Madam Rashmi Malik, Ms. Ahana Subbarwal, Ambassador, Girl Scout, and my dear students. It's over to you, Ahana, to introduce Ms. Bhakti Mathur.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Zoom meeting. My name is Ahana Sabharwal. I've been a Girl Scout for 9 years now, and I'm currently an ambassador. I'm studying in Hong Kong, and this is my last year of school. And some of you might have joined the last 2 Zoom meetings where we discussed reading, on which for the mission for Sisterhood of Readers. Today, you'll be talking with an amazing author named Bhakti Mathur, who started writing back in 2010. She wrote the popular series Amma Tell Me series of children's books about Indian festivals and mythology. She lives in Hong Kong with her husband, 2 children, and 2 dogs. She holds a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing from the University of Hong Kong and is also a freelance journalist for the South Morning China Post. That's the newspaper in Hong Kong. She has kindly agreed to guide us in how to write and wants to encourage us to try writing and our own books. Over to you, Bhakti.
Oh, thank you, Ahana, for that wonderful introduction. And I have to let everyone into a secret. I bribed Ahana to say all those wonderful things about me. I want to take this opportunity to thank Priya for setting this up, for giving me an opportunity to talk to all you wonderful girls in Delhi. Delhi has a special place for me. I'm a Delhi girl. That's where I grew up. I went to school and college in Delhi. Also want to thank Rashmi and Sunita for those wonderful words, and again for getting this chance. So I'm going to start off telling you a bit about myself with a small presentation. Okay, great. So I titled this presentation Alice in Wonderland because I was thinking what to call it, and I really feel like Alice who's been in Wonderland with all this experience of writing and publishing, which I'm going to talk to you about. But before that, a little bit about myself. So this is my family. You can see, just a minute. I don't know why this is moving so fast. This is my family. You can see my, sorry, just give me a minute. My 2 kids, Shiv and Veer, who are now 12 and 10. And also, of course, my 2 furry friends. This is Rafa here, who's a rescue dog. And this is Samwise, and there's a story behind their names. Samwise is named after Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, which some of you, most of you may have read. And our first dog before this was Frodo Baggins, also named from the same book. So when Frodo passed away, which was a very sad event, we decided to get a dog and name him after Frodo's best friend. And Rafa, of course, is named after Rafael Nadal, who's a player I admire hugely. And then I wanted to also share a few things that I like doing. So I love running, and this is me attempting the New York Marathon in 2017, which took me almost 4 hours, 45 minutes to finish, but I did it. I also enjoy hiking with my boys, and we're very fortunate that in Hong Kong, there are these wonderful trails that we can get on. I think being in nature just opens the mind and makes me feel fresh and actually helps me write and think better. I also like doing yoga, and as you can see, I'm trying to do the headstand here and cheating a bit by resting my feet on the bookcase. And of course, hanging out with my two boys is one of my favorite things. Now, as you can see behind me, this is the bookcase that I pictured because I wanted to share that this is my most favorite thing to do, which is reading. I love reading and I've always read, and I wanted to talk a bit about where I got this habit from. So, as some of you may have read this quote, it's by Jorge Luis Borges, who's actually an Argentinian short story author, who has said, I've always imagined paradise as a kind of a library. And that's what I really think of heaven as. And this comes from my childhood. So this is a very famous quote, which you can read, that children are made readers on the laps of their parents. And you know, my mother read to me a lot when I was growing up. In fact, one of my fondest and first memories is sitting in her lap and being read to, and her reading me this book by Dr. Seuss called Horton Hears a Who. So I really think I became a reader, or my love for reading really came on her lap. And so coming to some of the books that got me started, so Horton Hears a Who that I spoke about. Then of course, Nancy Drew, which you know, a lot of you may be reading, and then Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, and that really drew me into reading. Then I want to tell you a bit about what I did. I grew up in Delhi, like I said. I went to modern school. Then I went to Shriram College of Commerce. I studied economics and I did a master's in finance, and I became a banker. So I was a banker for 22 years and I really liked what I did. Very recently, I went back to school again in 2015, and my kids joke with me. They said, my God, Amma, you went back to school in your 40s, which is not a nice thing to hear. But I did, and I really liked it. And I studied creative writing at the University of Hong Kong. And this is the graduation where you get to throw your cap. And then coming to my journey of writing. So this is the first book that I wrote, which is Amma, Tell Me About Holi. This was published in 2010. And as you can see, it's a book about the festival of Holi. And this is a picture book. It's written in rhyme because I was inspired by Dr. Seuss. And like him, I also wanted to write in rhyme because I thought it makes it a lot of fun for both parents and for children to read in rhyme. 10 years later, I've been very, very fortunate that the series has grown to 12 books. And there are books on Diwali, Ramayana. There's a trilogy on Krishna. There's a trilogy on Hanuman. There's a book on Ganesha, Raksha Bandhan. And one of my favorites on Durga Puja, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Recently, I also started a series with Penguin in India. And this is called the Amma Take Me series. This is a travelogue of a mother and her two boys as they go to these different places of worship in India. And the kids are obviously very curious as they're walking to the monuments, and they ask many questions, and Amma tries to answer them in a fun way, making it preachy, making it exciting. So my endeavor in writing the Amma Take Me series was really that anyone who wants to travel to these places, if they were to read these books and that would interest them to go, and they would carry the book along and find it useful, I think I would have done my job as an author. And I'd speak about these books a little bit more in detail soon. So the next question is, how did it all start? And why did I choose to write about mythology? So the motivation really are Shiv and Veer. My kids were very small. This is a picture almost 9 years earlier. And Holi was around the corner. And I was looking for a book on Holi to tell them about it. I couldn't really find anything, and I decided to write to share with them all the festivals that I grew up celebrating. So as you can see, they're really guinea pigs because they read my drafts, they give me their opinions, and they're quite blunt. They don't shy from telling me if they don't like something. And this is Veer, my younger son, who's my editor at work, throwing my papers, but he gives good feedback, so he's forgiven. So back to the question of why mythology. So there are really 4 reasons. The first is my own childhood. So when I grew up, and maybe a lot of teachers will be able to relate to this, there were no iPads and there were no iPhones. So when I used to come home from work, my mother was a librarian, she would be at office. I had a male nanny who would take care of me, and his name quite aptly was Bhagwan. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but he was the best storyteller I've come across. So he would sit me down, and for 2 hours every day, he'd tell me all these stories from the Mahabharata, from the Ramayana. So imagine hearing about these most magnificent kings, these heroic people, the most evil of adversaries. And so that's what piqued my interest. And when my kids were growing up, I wanted to really share the stories that I grew up hearing. And celebrate and talk about the festivals that I grew up celebrating in India. Now, so that was the first reason. The second is the stories. I mean, where else can you find such exciting stories with plots and twists than Indian mythology? And where else can you get such fantastic characters? Look at Hanuman. A lot of you have obviously read about Hanuman. You know, as a child, he was naughty. He tried to eat the sun, but he grew up to be this wonderful, loyal friend. And then look at Krishna. Krishna lied to his mother. Krishna stole. But Krishna, we love Krishna with all his imperfections. Krishna was also a master strategist. He helped the Pandavas win the war. So these characters are very wholesome, and they teach us that all of us have a part which is naughty, and all of us have a very good part, and it's up to us which part we want to develop. And also, it teaches about how we behave has a consequence. So we all know what Ravan did. We all know the consequence. We all know what Kansa did. We all know the consequence. So when I was growing up and my mother would tell me, be good, be a good friend, you know, it was a little meaningless to me because I didn't know how to be good. But if you look at these characters, and if you look at our mythology, like the Ramayana, it teaches you how to be a good son, how to be a good friend, how to be a good brother or a sister. So they are examples on how one can behave, which is why I really like Indian mythology and I chose Indian mythology. So this is a little section on writing. But before I delve into that, I just wanted to share a bit about and read two of my books to you. And then I thought we could use those as examples for the stories. So now I'm just bear with me for a minute. I'm going to open a book, Amma Tell Me book, which is going to be about Durga and Durga Puja. So this is a book I wrote, which is called Amma Tell Me About Durga Puja, and it's very close to my heart. And, you know, since we're talking about a sisterhood and a sisterhood of reading, and really it is about having a sense of community and as sisters lifting each other up. So I'm going to start with Mahisha. You know, so as you can see, Mahisha was a demon who had a body of steel, and he had these two huge horns, and he really wanted to rule the world. That was his ambition. So you know what he did? One fine day, he climbed a mountain and he stood like a rock in meditation for years and years, bearing the freezing cold, and he's praying to Brahma, the Lord of creation. And Brahma finally appeared before him and said, Mahisha, what is it that you want? I'm really pleased with your devotion. And Mahisha said that I want to live forever. And Brahma said that you can't live forever because everything that's born dies. So Mahisha said, in that case, please grant me that no man or no animal can ever kill me. So Brahma said, okay, granted, but use your wish wisely. But what did Mahisha do? Mahisha, with his newfound power, started unleashing terror on everybody and conquering lands and killing people. And so people were really worried and people were crying and they were being traumatized. So they went to, of course, you know, the three gods, the three best friends, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. And they went to Brahma and said, you know, Brahma, this is all your mistake. You're the one who gave them this silly boon, and look at what he's doing. He's terrorizing us. Do something. So all the three gods got together. They put all their energies together, and from that energy, there rose this huge fire. And guess what came out from the fire? A beautiful lady with black eyes, long tresses, and she was the goddess Durga, created by the energy of these three gods. And then all the gods gave her a weapon to fight with. So Shiva gave her a trident, the wind god gave her a bow, Vishnu gave her the discus, and you can see she has 10 arms and she's holding different weapons. And guess what they gave her as a pet? They gave her a lion to ride. And so Durga was all ready to take on Mahisha. And now you can see she goes to war with him. And Durga exhales, and in a breath, a huge army comes out to take on Mahisha. But Mahisha is very clever, and Mahisha has one gift. He's a shape-shifting demon. So he can actually change his shape. So guess what he does? He then becomes a lion. And before Durga can pounce on him, he changes and he becomes like a huge monster. And Durga again tries to go and attack him, but then he changes into an elephant. And with his trunk, he tries to pull Durga's lion. So Durga realizes that I've got to be really quick this time. So you know what she does? Before Mahisha can change into any other form, Durga takes a trident and she stabs it in Mahisha, and that is the end of Mahisha. So you can see Durga achieved a task that none of the gods could do, and she destroyed Mahisha. And I'm going to go to the start of the book, which talks about Durga Puja. So this is why we celebrate Durga. So, Durga Puja is celebrated mainly in Calcutta and North India. So this is a scene from Calcutta where the city is buzzing with excitement. There's hustle and bustle. People are shopping. Then you can see a statue of Durga getting its finishing touches. And really, there's a lot of excitement in the entire city. And finally, the days or the festival of Durga Puja come. So the first day is Mahalaya, when you invoke the goddess to come to your house. Because as many of you may know, Durga is married to Shiva, and Shiva lives in Mount Kailash. So Durga actually leaves her husband and comes with her 4 children to spend time with her friends, her family, and her parents. And in celebration, these huge pandals are constructed, and you can see all her 4 children are here, which you may recognize. There's Ganesha, there's Saraswati, there's Lakshmi, there's Kartikeya, and we all pray to her. And then you can see this beautiful scene where there are many lights which are being lit, and all flowers are being offered to Durga, all as a form of love and devotion for her. And then here, there's singing and there's dancing, and this is called the Dhanuchi dance, which is very, very beautiful. And then there's a very exciting festival within Durga Puja I wanted to talk about, which is called Vijaya Dashmi. Now, Vijaya Dashmi is special because it's a festival celebrated only, it's called Sindoor Khela, which happens on Vijaya Dashmi. It's a festival celebrated only by women and for women. No boys are allowed. And it's really a celebration of being a woman, of, being a daughter, being a wife, being a mother, and you take sindoor or red powder and smear it in each other because you're really happy that you are a woman and you're really celebrating this sisterhood that you were talking about and being there for each other. So I think this, for me, this was a very special part of the celebrations. And then finally, Durga has to go back to her husband. So people take her images in this boat on the Ganges. And then along with the children, the statues are immersed where she swims and goes back to Shiva to be with him. So really, it's a 10-day period where she comes along with the children, leaving her husband to be with her family. But for me, what Durga means is that there are many sides to us. So Durga, as a woman, we are expected to be meek, we are expected to be submissive, and most women are polite and gentle. But the message here is that being polite and gentle doesn't mean that you're weak. And it doesn't mean that you can't take a stand for yourself. So Durga shows us that let no man ever mistake politeness for weakness, and that we all have that Shakti in us to stand up for ourselves. And the mistake that Mahisha made was just to assume that a woman is so weak that she couldn't kill him. So I think the first thing is the recognition of our own inner strength and to have that conviction and belief in ourselves. And that is what Durga stands for me, for inner strength or Shakti. So this was a book on Durga Puja. And then I'd like to share another book on my favorite god, who's Hanuman. So I'm going to open that. And I have a trilogy on Hanuman. This is the second book, which talks about how Hanuman crossed the ocean. And I really like this book because there are 3 small mini stories in it, which really talks about how Hanuman dealt with 3 different problems using 3 different strategies. So, in life, we all are going to have problems. So sometimes we may find homework hard, or we may find learning a new sport hard, or sometimes we may find, settling in or getting along or making new friends hard. There are different things. So there are different strategies to deal with it. So I'm going to come to that. Okay, so everyone can see the screen now. Fantastic. So, it is dinner time, and Klaka and Kiki are Amma's 2 boys, and they're having dinner together, and they are talking to her about Hanuman, because Amma has told them the story of how Hanuman as a child wanted to eat the sun, and he was very naughty, and he tried to eat the sun, which of course fortunately he didn't, and he was blessed with supernatural powers, and he tried to disturb a sage by stealing his basket of flowers when he was meditating. So the sage actually cursed him and said, Hanuman, you're going to forget all the powers that you have, but you'll remember it one day when you meet a friend who is in need, who really wants your help. So this is where the story starts, when the kids ask Amma that, Amma, did Hanuman's powers ever return? And Amma says, yes, they did, and let's hear the story. So as you know, Ravan had kidnapped Sita, and Ram and Lakshman are distraught looking for her. and they're walking in the jungles in India when they meet this monkey. And they become friends with him. They start talking to him, and they look so sad. He asks them what's wrong, and they tell him, and Hanuman feels very bad for them and says, I'm going to help you find Sita. He said, but how are we going to do it? Because they know Sita has been taken across the ocean to Lanka. And so they go by the seashore, and there's a really old bear who you can see here behind called Jambawan. And Jambawan says, Hanuman, if there's one person who can go across the ocean, it's you. And Hanuman says, what do you think? I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm a bird? Do you think I have wings? I can't fly. And in those days, there were no ships, there was no MTR, there were no planes. So how do you get across? So Jambawan said, Hanuman, you have to remember your powers. You have these special powers. All you need to do is remember them. So Hanuman goes and stands on top of a mountain, and he focuses all his energies on Ram, who is his friend. And then his face glows like the rising sun, and there's energy all through his body. And he lifts up one hand, and whoosh, suddenly we see him flying. He takes off. And it really is a beautiful sight, because he goes across the ocean, and there are dolphins and fish that come out to look at this wondrous sight. But very soon, there's something that comes and blocks his way. And it's a mountain. And it's a mountain called Menaka. And the mountain says, greetings, Hanuman. You look so tired. Why don't you rest on our slopes and enjoy the cool breeze? And Hanuman says, hang on, I'll come back. But right now, I don't have time for this. I want to help my friend Ram find Sita. So please let me go. And the mountain is very, very impressed. What a loyal friend he is, and says, Hanuman, please carry on. But then Hanuman is out of luck that day, because as he goes forward, something else comes and blocks his way. And it's a huge sea snake called Sursa. And Sursa hasn't had breakfast. And Sursa says, my God, that's a yummy monkey for me to eat. And Hanuman says, hang on, I don't have time to get eaten right now, because I have to help my friend. So I'll come back later and you can eat me up later. And Sursa says, no, I'm going to eat you now. And Hanuman says, please. So Sursa says, okay, on one condition. If you can enter my mouth and come out of my mouth alive, then I will let you go. Now, can you guys imagine entering a snake's mouth and coming out of the mouth alive? But Hanuman is clever. He does it. You know what he does? He becomes as small as a bumblebee, quickly enters the snake's mouth, and before she can snap her jaws shut, he is out. So Sursa is so impressed, and she says, Hanuman, you're so clever. You outwitted me. I have to keep my word and let you go, and good luck. So Hanuman says, oh, thank God. And he continues flying. But after flying for a few miles or hundreds of miles, there's someone else who comes and blocks his way. And this is a huge sea dragon called Simhika. Now, Simhika gobbles Hanuman up, and before Hanuman knows, he's in her stomach going down. And he's desperate. He needs to get out of there. So he uses his strength. He tears open the stomach, and he comes out. But then he's flying, and after many hours, he sees this light shining in one corner. And he says, wow, that must be the golden city of Lanka. And finally, he lands on the shores of Lanka. But guess what? There is a demoness waiting for him. And she says, oh, monkey, I am Lankini. I am the gatekeeper of Lanka. And you have to actually fight with me before I let you in. And Hanuman says, look, I'm only looking for my friend's wife. I don't want to fight, let me go. And she says, I'm sorry, these are the rules here, I'm the god. So even though he doesn't want to, he fights Lankini. You know how? He takes his tail, he makes it really large, and with a swish of his tail, he flicks Lankini away, who falls with a thud. And finally, Hanuman is able to enter Lanka. So what I really like is that there are three problems, or sort of three challenges that Hanuman had to overcome. The first is Menaka, the mountain. So what did he do with the Menaka? He used politeness. He was very polite with her and said, please let me go, and it worked. Then what did he do with the snake? He was very quick-witted. He used his brains, his strategy. So maybe sometimes we need to do that. And then finally, what did he do with Simhika? With Simhika, he used his strength. So maybe sometimes when we're being bullied at school, we just need to put our hands out, be strong, and say, stop, don't do that. So, Amma ends this with a very, very interesting message and saying, Klaka and Kiki, life is going to throw challenges at you, but you need to have faith and courage like Hanuman. And if you do, you'll be able to overcome them. So this is why these stories are some of my favorites, because I really like the message it gives, and I really like how it, tells us how to deal with different situations. So now I'm just going to shut this, and I'm going to come back and open another file. Yeah. You guys can see Golden Temple? Okay, excellent. So now this is one of the first book in the second series called Amma Take Me. And this is the one I was talking about, which is a travelogue of a mother and her kids. So the first place I actually went to was the Golden Temple 4 years back with my family. And it was really a wonderful experience for me. So I'm going to take you through a few of the things that I really enjoyed. Sorry, the screen seems to have vanished. Yeah, it's come now. So this is very interesting because it actually gives you a map of the Golden Temple. This is the Harmandir Sahib, and these are 3 trees, which we'll talk about briefly. So a little bit about the Golden Temple. So what the few things that really struck me was when I went with my kids is how beautiful it was. And when we walked in, we went at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it really seemed, it was night, it really seemed like this whole sort of oasis of gold, which was emerging from this very quiet lake. And then as we entered, there was this Gurbani, this really, really melodious music. And even though my children and me, we don't really understand the language, a few words I could tell, but my children certainly could not. It really, really calmed us down. I thought that was really nice, the peace, the tranquility, and the music. And then, of course, it was hard for me to wake up my kids. So I had told them that Amma had told them that we are going to meet a 400-year-old guru. And they actually thought that there's this guru who's 400 years old. And they couldn't believe it. And they were very excited to see him. And these are some of the images. But then I'm just putting a part where, and I wanted to read a part and where Shiva said, Amma, is the guru really 400 years old? And Amma said yes and no, because what she was referring to when they went early in the morning is the ceremony called Palki Sahib, which some of you may have witnessed if you went, because the Guru is actually a book. It is the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which is the wisdom of all the Gurus, and which is now considered as a living Guru. And it is actually kept in the Akal Takht, because it's treated like a living Guru who sleeps there. And every morning, with due respect and reverence, it's carried in a palki into the main temple, into Harmandir Sahib. So Amma tricked the kids a little bit, and they were a little confused at first that how can a book be a guru, but then they finally understood it. Also, interesting fact about Sikhism is that this religion is one of the world's youngest religions. 500 years old, started by a very, very wise man, as you may know, called Guru Nanak. So I wanted to share an interesting story about Guru Nanak. Now, Guru Nanak's father wanted him to be a merchant and start a shop and trade when he came of age. But Guru Nanak was always had a spiritual bent, and he used to spend a lot of time with fakirs and sages and talking to them. So one day his father got really angry and said, come here, Nanak. He said, take this money. I want you to go to the local market, and I want you to buy some food and spices, and I want you to really bargain and buy them at a good price and prove to me that you can become a trader. So Nanak, little boy Nanak, wanted to listen to his father, set off on the way. So on the way, he passed a forest, and in the forest, he came across this group of sadhus, and the sadhus were meditating, and they hadn't eaten or had water for days. And this particular sect of sadhu only ate food or drank water if it was given to them. They didn't believe in begging or asking other people. So Nanak felt really bad for them. And then he said, okay, let me come back. So Nanak went to the village, to the market, he negotiated really hard. He bought rice, he bought dal, he bought some vegetables, and he came and he cooked a wholesome meal and he fed these sages. And then when he went back home, his father asked him that, what happened? What did you buy? Did you get a good deal? Did you bargain? Did you negotiate? And he was quiet. And then finally he said, I actually met a group of sadhus who were hungry and I fed them. And his father scolded him and said, I told you to strike a bargain and you wasted all my money. And then Nanak replied, what could be a better bargain than feeding sadhus who are hungry? So this tells you really about how Guru Nanak thought. And then, of course, he went on to start the religion. Some of the things that really struck me and that I really liked was the concept of seva. So when we entered the Golden Temple, we had to give our shoes at a counter. And there were volunteers who took our shoes, kept them, wiped the counter clean, and doing this work with so much love without expecting anything in return. So I really like this concept of seva, when you do something for others without expecting anything in return. And similarly, there were people who were wiping the floors inside. I also saw two men who were cleaning the Amrit Sarovar, or the lake, in which the Golden Temple is located. Then another thing I really liked about the Golden Temple, which I didn't know before I went, is, most temples have one entrance, or maybe at the most two, one to enter, one to exit. Guess how many the Golden Temple has? It has 4 entrances. And you know why? To show that people of every caste, every creed are welcome, from every direction, from all over the world. So they don't believe in any caste, or anyone is superior, anyone is inferior. I love that. Also, I did not know this, but the foundation stone of the Golden Temple was actually set by a Sufi saint called Mia Hazrat Mir, which is so fantastic, because I think this religion really believed in imbibing the best things from all religions. So there's a lot, of course, and there's not enough time to go through the entire book, but I want to go to one interesting section, 2 interesting sections actually. One is about Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So the temple, when it was made, was a very simple structure, but it was really gilded in gold by Ranjit Singh, who was a ruler, and he ruled Punjab and Lahore, large parts of North India. He was a great warrior. He was 10 years old when he fought his first battle, and he was blind in one eye, because when he was a child, because of an illness, he lost one eye, but still he was so spiritual and such a good leader. So the Golden Temple, the way you see it today, a lot of it is because of the efforts of Ranjit Singh. And then I would like to talk about the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh. So I'm going to go straight onto that. Of course, you can see some images of Amma and the kids enjoying quiet moments by the lake. And there are 3 trees under which the gurus who built it used to actually sit and watch the construction of the temple. 1 minute.
One thing, Bhakti, which we need to tell the kids is that we are supposed to cover our heads, whenever we are entering
Yes.
the Golden Temple. Yeah,
That's true. So I'm going to cover that in the end on some interesting facts that I have. So I'll just come to that.
yes.
So, this is the story of how the Khalsa was formed. So it was Baisakhi in 1699. And Guru Gobind Singh, who was Guru Gobind Rai at that time, he had called all his followers to Anandpur, where he lived, to meet them. And then there was this huge gathering, and he said, which one of you is ready to lay down your life for me? And there was silence, because people couldn't believe that a guru is actually asking somebody to give their lives. Finally, one man came, and then the guru was very happy. He took him behind, and everyone heard a swish of the sword and a big thud. And they imagined the worst. They thought his head had been sliced off. And some people left, and there was panic. But Guru Gobind Singh came and asked for a second person and a third, and he chose 5 people like this. And 5 times they heard the swish of the sword and the thud. And by the end of it, people were really scared. But guess what happened? After a while, Guru Gobind Singh came out with all the 5 people. Nobody had been killed. And he said, this was your test of your devotion to me. And he says, these are my Panch Pyare, or my 5 beloved. And these are the first people of the Khalsa. And the meaning Khalsa means pure, but the more important meaning is that it's casteless. They have no caste, no high caste and no low caste. We are all equal. And he baptized them. And then by giving them some water to drink. And then he said, now you baptize me. So these 5 followers were really shocked. They said, how can we baptize you? You are a guru. So he said, in a Khalsa, there is no guru and there are no followers, because all of us are equal. And I really like this, that it's a casteless community of equal people. So they baptized him back. And then he said that there are going to be 5 Ks that you have. He didn't say 5 Ks, of course, we call it the 5 Ks. The 5 things that you have to wear, and a lot of you may know them. Right? So the first is kesh, or long hair, because it gave them a common identity. And also sadhus had long hair, so it's a sign of spirituality. Then, of course, a comb or a kanga to keep your hair clean. Then you have a kacha or shorts, because, as soldiers, it says you're wearing shorts, you're ready to go to war for self-defense at any time. Then a kirpan or a small dagger, also for self-defense or to help those in need. And then a kara that you wear on the hand that holds a sword, so it protects the wrist holding or yielding sword. So those are the 5 Ks. And then, so I think that really this was the spirit of the teachings. And the spirit of what Guru Nanak said and what Guru Gobind Singh said were actually quite similar. It was love and it was equality. And then Amma, of course, asked the boys that who's your favorite guru? So Shiv says that my favorite guru is Guru Gobind Singh because he was a sportsman and I want to be a sportsman too. And then the younger one, V, says my favorite guru is Guru Nanak. And Amma says, why? He says, because I'm very hungry and he started the langar and now I want to go and eat. So, the langar also is the biggest community kitchen in the world. And the Golden Temple feeds 50,000 to a lakh people. And Rashmi, what you were saying, coming to that, there are a few interesting facts. So these are the 10 gurus. And then there are a few interesting facts here. So as you can see, the fourth last, all visitors must wash their feet and cover their heads before entering, which is what you were saying. Then the langar cooks food for huge, like 1 lakh people. Almost 40,000 to 1 lakh people visit every day. Then there is Kar Seva that I was talking about, a voluntary work where people work selflessly. It's the world's youngest religion. And then this is very interesting that BBC's popular program Holiday ranked the Golden Temple much higher in the places to see, much higher than Taj Mahal. So you can see that Taj Mahal was ranked at number 10 and Golden Temple was, I think, number 6. So, these are just some interesting things and it was a really interesting experience. So now I'm going to come back to the presentation and talk maybe 5-10 minutes if we have on writing. And then, I'm happy to take questions on your writing board if the kids can. A little bit about the writing process. But before that, just a brief overview of the different types of writing. So, you can write fiction, which is stories that you make up. Then you can write dramas, which is plays. You can write non-fiction. And then you can write some poetry, traditional type of writing and poetry. So I'll briefly go through each of them. So fiction, you have realistic fiction, which is based on your experiences, somebody else's experiences, but you make it like a story. Historical fiction is, about history. So if you write about the Taj Mahal, maybe about the Golden Temple, but you build a story in it, that's historical fiction. Mystery, all of you know. Memoir is very interesting, and science fiction, fantasy. Then if you come to dramas, there are different types of dramas. There's a comedy, there's a tragedy. If you've read Shakespeare, if you're going to study Shakespeare, a lot of this will come under that. Then non-fiction also, there are different types. The most popular ones are biography, when you write about somebody else's story, or biography if you want to write your own life story. Persuasive writing, when you want to convince people to an argument. Then there's humorous writing speeches, nature, different things. And then also in traditional, you have fairy tales, legends, myths. So you can see there's a whole field. And if you want to write, you can pick any one of them, right? There's a wide variety. Now the question is, what should I write about? And I'm going to come to that next. But before that, just a little overview of the writing process. So what happens is, first you sit and think, what should I write about? And you generate ideas. Then when you get your seed ideas, you make a brief plan that, okay, I'm going to write, let's say, a fiction story. Then you have your characters in place, the story comes to mind, whatever is in your heart, you pour it out, you get your first draft. Then your draft is ready, but it's just the first draft where you put everything in together. But then you need to go and see what is working, what is not working. Is my story exciting? Are my characters real? Are the dialogues exciting? Are there any other twists and turns that it could take? Then you revise several times in the editing process, and then you publish your story. And so we're going to come to each of these steps briefly. Now, before that, how do you make a story plot? So you have an idea for something. Now, how do you make a plot? So I'm going to take the example of the Durga story. So there's a beginning where the characters and the setting are introduced. So what was the setting in the Durga story was that Mahisha, the demon, had got this boon and he was wreaking havoc on everyone, right? That's the setting. And the 3 gods then came together. So the rising action is the 3 gods came together and they said, fine, we are going to try and find a solution. So they created Durga, and then Durga and Mahisha came face to face, which was the climax, their war, and how Mahisha changed shape and Durga tried to get him, but she missed him. And there was back and forth. And finally, she was able to kill him. So that's really the climax. And then there is falling action in the sense that it leads towards a resolution. So she kills Mahisha. And then finally, there is a message at the end of the story. So this is really the most exciting part. But if you're going to give the most exciting part in the beginning, nobody's going to read the book. So we have to build up to it. and it has to be building up where the main character is facing a conflict, and then you have a climax, and then finally an end of the story. So if you keep this in mind, then I think it becomes helpful in drafting the story. And then the question is, what should I write about? And where do you get ideas from? So I always say that write about what you're passionate about, what comes from your heart, what keeps you up at night, whatever you're curious about, what you want to learn more about. What is it that excites you, that stimulates you? And that can come from life experiences, some story you heard, something that happened in your family, maybe a story that you've heard or a situation, a what if scenario, that what if I could go to the moon? What if I could become a scientist? What if I could become an athlete? What if there was a huge earthquake tomorrow? I mean, there's so many what ifs, and you can let your imagination run wild. You can also write from a news story. There's so much that's been happening. You can pick anything up and write about that. A dream that you've had, an interesting person you've met, something interesting somebody has said. A lot of time you get ideas from photographs. So see, these are some of the tools that you can use. And really, just to summarize, an experience that moves you, things you're passionate about, what are your interests, what you want to learn about. And I would recommend just keep a small journal handy with you, because you never know when a good idea strikes you. And very often we think we'll remember, but the truth is we forget. So if you have a journal handy and jot down those ideas, then before you know it, you'll have them down and you can work on it later. And so coming to the first draft. So, as a writer, I've been frustrated many times, because when I want to write, I want to get everything right very quickly, that everything should be perfect. But it just doesn't happen. So what I've learned over the years is that it's good to get your thoughts down all at once without stopping, whether it's a poem or a short story or a first chapter of a novel that you may be writing. Just get all your thoughts down. Don't stop the pen, no matter how bad you feel the grammar or the languages, all that can be improved later, but just get everything down. So the first draft, it doesn't matter if it's good, it's not going to be. First drafts are called shitty first drafts, because you're getting all your thoughts down. It just needs to exist. And then you can work on that after that. And then now you have to really write your story. So you have to tell your readers how you felt. Take them on a journey with you. And some of the ways to use it is use the 5 senses. So for example, if you tell me, if you're writing about an ice cream that you ate and you said, oh, ma'am, this ice cream is tasty. It doesn't do anything for me. But if you tell me this ice cream was melting and it was orange and I was licking it off my fingers and it smelled like oranges growing, and when I tasted it and put it in my mouth, it was like an explosion, then I really experience your experience. So this is very powerful. So try to use all the 5 senses. What you see, what you hear, when you touch it, what does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Try it maybe this week if you feel like, with anything. And then also use dialogues. So if you want to show that a character is greedy, instead of saying, Mr. A is greedy, that's so boring, show it by way of, let's say Mr. A is playing with Mr. B, or 2 children, A and B, are playing, and you want to show A is greedy, you can say that A snatched all the sweets from B and didn't share them with anybody else. So that's, a good way of showing. And then finally, how do you become a better writer? Now that you have your first draft ready, you've used some of the tools, you're working to edit your draft and revise your draft. One thing is journaling. So writing your thoughts down at the end every day in a journal. It could be about anything, an experience at school, a fight you had with someone, something you're grateful about, a bit about your story. It gets you into the habit of writing, which is very important. So at the end of the day or in the morning, you designate a time and write for 10 to 15 minutes every day. The other thing is start a book club. Maybe in your class with a few friends, or the entire class, you can divide it into groups, however you want to do it, or with friends outside school. And the good thing is, each one of you can meet at somebody's house once a month, or in school, let's say, you can schedule an hour once a month where every time one person picks a book. So let's say you pick a book on mystery. Next time someone will pick up a book on history. The next time someone will pick up an autobiography. And what happens is, because people are picking up their own choices, which will be different from what you normally read, you will read much more books that you would never read yourself. And then once you've read it, you can talk about what you liked in the book, what you didn't like in the book, it'll also give you ideas in your own writing. You can see different authors' writing styles and you can imbibe it into your own. But I think the main thing it'll do is it'll make you read a wide variety of books. And there's a huge learning that comes from that. And then, of course, read more. If you want to be a better writer, become a better reader. Delve into the lives of other authors. Read a lot of biographies. So I think there's really no substitute for reading. And then finally, it's frustrating when you're writing because not everything comes out the way you want it to. And there will be many mistakes. It might take you several drafts to get your poem right, or it might take you several drafts to get a story in shape. But you know what? Mistakes mean that you're on the right path because everybody makes mistakes. You need to embrace mistakes. In fact, look forward to them. Because if you're not making any, that means you're not really progressing. So it's normal to make mistakes. It's normal for it to take time. So embrace it. And finally, what I tell myself every day is never give up. Writing to me is like doing homework in your favorite subject every day. That's not that hard, right? You may not like chemistry, but you may like English. Somebody who doesn't like English may like physics. Somebody who doesn't like physics may like history. So you're picking up a topic that is close to your heart that you like, and you're writing about that. So if you can do 15 minutes of homework in your favorite subject every day, you know what? You can be a writer, which means all of you can be writers. There is no science to it. It's not rocket science. It's just a few of these things put together, following a few of these tools and methods. And the most important is to never give up. So this is what I really wanted to share. And if there's time, I'd really love to take some questions. Maybe talk about if anyone has questions on writing, on publishing, or any other questions.
Yeah, Bhakti, can you just stop sharing the screen so that we can interact?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. And I would just like to say, what mesmerized me when you were talking to all of them. I think when you explained about your journey, how you started writing, I think this feeling was instilled in you when you were very, very young. And I think this you took from your mother. So you are carrying forward that thing in you. Second thing, the book that you read on Durga Puja, I think it was amazing. The pictorial presentation is something which attracts students. And the story that you read, it's not about Durga, it's about the power that she possessed and how making use of all those powers in a very positive way, right? Your second story, I think Hanuman is such a character which everybody likes, right? So when we talk about Hanuman, we always think of strength, that he was so powerful, right? But through the stories, through that story of Hanuman, what you have tried to explain, that he was very light also by nature. He was very witty. That means any situation where he was put in, he applied his presence of mind and how to overcome that particular situation and taking the decision in terms of what is right, what is wrong. That means having the courage to say no. That means to differentiate between what is right, what is wrong. Now, Bhakti, your travelogue about visit to the Golden Temple. I think I was looking at your website. I could peep into some of the videos which were there. They were amazing videos, right? So through that teaching to our young children that seva is something that we all should do. It is something that we are doing for the society. Now the learnings from the Guru Gobind Singh, that there is no religion, there is no caste, all are equal. So all these storybooks, they are not just storybooks, but they are teaching you lots of morality, right? Now your journey regarding the writing, I think very well you explained to students that if you really want to get into writing, what all steps are there? It's not that you straightway start writing, no. You need to generate ideas for it. You need to plan. You need to have a first draft of it, second draft of it, revising, revisiting what you have written. Editing part is so important. And then you're switching over to the publishing. So I think everything that you explained, I'm sure that it is going to generate curiosity in our minds. You never know, students, they start switching over to it and they take up this as a profession, right? Because I find that children who read a lot, Their expression is good. So reading and writing, these are the two things which go hand in hand. So Bhakti, that was so mesmerizing listening to you. Now I request our school principal, Madam Rashmi Malik, to kindly extend closing remarks. Ma'am, it's over to you.
Yeah, Bhakti, I think they will not be able to write on the chat.
I
So
see.
we can request them to raise their hands. Children, if you have a query or question for the author, please raise your hand. Yeah, so Dilbag, please unmute them accordingly.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's Ashita Yadav, 6th.
Ashita, ask.
Ashita, you can ask the question.
Hi, Ashita. I can't hear Ashita.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
And good morning, Rashmi, ma'am.
Good morning, Babu.
Ma'am, I want to ask a question that if I want to be an author in the future, so ma'am, what qualities to be an author so that the people will like my book and they will just see that I am a good author.
Sorry, I couldn't hear it. It said what
He
qualities.
wants to be a bestseller author.
Oh, wow.
It's asking you
Okay.
to share some tips with her.
You know, I think you should write for the joy of writing. You know, because somehow when I think if I want to write with the purpose, of course, all of us want our work to be read because, you know, we all want validation and appreciation. Everyone wants that. So I do understand that. But the main aim of writing really should be for the joy that the writing brings to you. And that itself should be the reward. So for me, from my journey, what I can tell you is don't write because, you know, you feel you want to be a commercial success. Then you become a banker, you know, or choose a different line. But if you really, writing is really for the joy that it gives you, the pleasure and the happiness that it will give you, you know, that should be the reward of writing. And the qualities that you ask for, the qualities are really that you have to be determined and you have to be disciplined. You know, like I said, it's like doing homework in your favorite subject. If you can be determined, set your mind to it, not give up, and work on it every day, you will become an author. You will become a great author. And if you write good work, for sure everyone will want to read it, because who doesn't want to be transported into another world and read good work? And it doesn't matter if the topic you choose has been written about earlier. You have to choose something you're passionate about, because it's the way you present it and your thoughts. And if you write well, the whole world will read it.
True.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ashita,
Trisha?
for your question. Yeah. Trisha,
Good morning, ma'am. Nice to meet you. I honestly, in the process, when you're writing a story, in the editing part, what edits are made there, like some grammatical mistakes if there are, or in what?
So that's a
what
very That's a very good question. So editing is actually a very important process, and the answer is very long. Maybe I can email to Sunita ma'am or Rashmi ma'am separately, but just to tell you briefly, you look for a few things. Grammatical and spelling is one, but that's very easy to pick up. But you look at the flow of the story. You look at every line and say, is this adding to my story and moving my story forward? And if it's not, you delete it. Then secondly, you look at the words that you're using, the verbs and the adjectives, and you see, can I use better verbs or better adjectives to describe the same situation? Then you look at the dialogues and you say, are the dialogues interesting? So one of the things to do is, if you've written it, let's say you have a first draft ready, you leave it for a week, because sometimes when you're working on it too much, the mind gets a little tired. Come back to it after a week and then read it, and you'll be able to spot, you know, the places which need changes themselves. The other thing that you can do is, just like a book club, maybe with your teacher, 5, 6 of you in small groups, you can make a writing group. So what happens in a writing group is you can meet once a week and each person can share their work and say, this is what I've written, and ask for feedback from people. So your friends may tell you that, hey, you know, this part is really exciting, but you know what, this part is a little boring, I can't understand. And then you will figure out which parts you need to rework. But it's really a good question, and I will send a more detailed email to your teachers with maybe references to some books also that you can refer to on how to edit. But it's very important.
Yeah, we'll share it with all the participants, whatever
Yes.
content you share, and we'll ensure that you know, you remain in touch with all the budding writers of our schools. So
That would be
that's something which we'll really ensure. I mean, I think within a week's time we'll be having, those club constituted, across the schools. And then maybe we'll put you as mentor if you allow us. Maybe
Sure.
they can just send you emails and get your suggestions to the various book
Sure, sure. That would
and
be
the
lovely.
topics and other things. So that we'll be doing. Okay, next question.
Next is Deepika.
Ritik. Okay.
Hi,
Good
Ritika.
morning.
Morning.
Hi, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ma'am, what is your favorite book?
Oh, my favorite book. Wow, that is a great question. Very difficult to answer because there's so many favorites, but I can tell you some of my favorites. One of my favorites is The Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you guys have ever read it by J.R.R. Tolkien. I really like that book. My other all-time favorite book is by an author called MMK, The Far Pavilions. It's about 1,000 pages, but I read it when I was, I think, quite similar in age to you. Maybe I think I was about 10 or 11, and I couldn't put it down. That's another favorite. Then another favorite of mine has been this author, Daphne du Maurier. I don't know if any one of you guys have heard. This is Rebecca, is a book that I really enjoy. And the fourth one that really comes to my mind is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. That's another favorite.
Yes.
And I hope you have these in your library.
We'll check that. What happens, Bhakti, even you must have experienced this, that each one of us some, different vibrations which we get attracted towards, So
That is true.
the books cannot be common favorite of everyone as such. So all these 100 individuals here will have 100 different interests, in variety of books. Like I love Polo Colo, all that's associated with spirituality and all. So similarly, these children will also have to find which book they resonate well with, and maybe that will really help them to improve. Okay, next question.
Next is Arisha. Unmute yourself.
Arisha Dhupar.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning to all the teachers present here. My name is Arisha and I'm from Jan Devi Salwan Public School in the Old Rajendra Nagar. Ma'am, this question goes just related to your books, that which is your favorite author?
Oh,
The most favorite author?
I think I'll have to. I think I'll have to say J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but it's a trilogy, and it's about.
Yeah, I have heard the name. Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's a movie also now, but I'd urge you to read the books before you watch the movie. And both my dogs were named after the characters, so it's really it's a big favorite.
Oh, that's so nice. I too have a dog, and nice to talk to you. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next is Arishivan from SPS Rajendra Nagar. Unmute yourself.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Ma'am, like you said, I know that we should write for writing. We should write for joy of writing. But how can we relate with recent pandemic situation?
Writing about the recent pandemic situation, or generally, are you talking about how you're feeling during the general pandemic situation?
Ma'am, I mean, how can I interpret? Can I take fictional characters as well?
Of course. So absolutely. I mean, when you're writing, you can write fiction, you can write non-fiction, you can write your experiences, you can write a memoir. In fact, in the pandemic situation, if you want to, one of the good things people have been advising is that there's a fair bit of stress and anxiety because this is an unusual situation, coronavirus, and it's a situation that happens once in a century. And I think for all of us, it causes, some sort of nervousness. You don't feel good about what's happening, people feeling ill all over the world, not being able to go out, feeling cooped up. So a good thing is to really write about how you're feeling, because when I journal, and when I was talking about journaling, I think a journal is like a best friend where you can really offload your feelings. So to answer your question, you can use the pandemic as an opportunity to write and maybe see what comes out of that. And to answer your other question, yes, you can absolutely write about anything that you feel like.
All right, Bhakti, actually we are
Thank you, ma'am.
10 minutes beyond our scheduled time,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
above our scheduled time, and I would request one teacher, last question from a teacher. If any teacher wants to ask a question. Any teacher? Just raise your hand so that we understand that, okay, you want to ask. All the children, you can, give your queries to your respective teachers, and then we will, forward it to Bhakti, and we'll send back your replies. No teacher wants to ask anything? Okay, so the wonderful session, I must say that. And I love the fact of, that you combine the mythology, you took, that as base and you started writing, and it's really, really relatable also, because I mean, the book of Durga and Hanuman took me back to my childhood. And now we have all those serials which are coming up. So whenever the children discuss about, what to do, watch the serial or read the book. So I always recommend that you read the book, because serial is creativity of somebody else.
Yes.
So you cannot, I mean, your brain will not have any exercise to be done, when you are just watching it without even thinking that what must be happening. So there, we were looking for good authors also, who keep us glued and who keep us, our creativity flowing in our brain. So your books are looking amazing. I mean, the very beautiful and colorful illustrations are there, and I'm really already fallen in love with all of them. And your travelogue also, I'm sure, will be very helpful for everyone. One thing which I want to thank here, a person apart from your mother, which Dr. Sunita has already talked about, is Bhagwan.
Yes, thank you.
The Bhagwan actually came in Rupa Bhagwan and gave you the bhakti. And then that is being shown in your books, and being rooted in Indian culture is very, very important for all the Indian children right now. And I'm so thankful that you spared your time to come down here and speak to our kids. I would also thank all the principals who really, really helped me. This is the last of a series which we were holding. I am sure Ahana must have told you. And I'm really thankful to Ahana also, Sisterhood of Learning, and then Priya, and all the principals, Dr. Ketrapal, for getting this entire thing connected. And I'm sure we'll have, by the end of this year, many authors coming out from our respective schools. And children, one thing which we can promise you is that you will be mentored, okay, by all the people who have met you. So we will be after your life, Bhakti. I know you are good at yoga, you are doing marathon, and it's amazing. I mean, you're a multifaceted person, and we really love to see that kind of individual, so that, we have that holistic living and holistic life. All right, so Ahana, if you have something to say, I'm sure that you were also full of a lot of ideas and a lot of things which you can talk about. Over to you.
Hi, okay. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mathur, for this informative session. It's very interesting and how you generated ideas and how you wrote your books. And I actually shared a lot of Ms. Mathur's books with the school, so please be free to pick it up and borrow from the library and read them. If you have any more questions, I'm sure you can email Ms. Mathur. I want to thank Dr. Indu Ketrapal and Ms. Rashmi Malik for supporting the Sisterhood of Readers and helping me organize this event. I wouldn't be able to do this without the help of Dr. Smita Jakhar and Mr. Dilbag for IT. Thank you so much, and you've been an incredible audience.
Yeah, we have Mr. Sudhir also in the background, and Lakshman also doing our videos. So the entire team, we are really thankful to all of you. And of course, Kumud and all the teachers who have joined us today. Thank you so very much. Yes, Sunita, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much once again to all of you. And thank you, Bhakti, for bringing our children close to culture through these books. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you to all the attendees for taking out your time and learning something new. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you.